In a world still chasing economic justice, one voice rises to inspire change. From the streets to the boardrooms, from ideas to real action, Cornell Cruz Jr. invites you to listen, learn, and transform. Drawn from the people, the community, always present, always pushing forward. Together we build opportunity, we build trust, and we build a just economy for all. This is the Just Economy Project, where equity has a sound, and the future begins with you.
Welcome, everyone, to the Just Economy Podcast. My name is Cornell Cruz Jr., Executive Director for the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida. We are a nonprofit statewide membership organization. What we do is ensure that the banks reinvest into the community per the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977, as well as provide collaborations and partnerships for the nonprofit organizations, government, and the community at large. We also run a nonprofit capacity building project where we provide grants to organizations in need of capacity building. So today we're going to have Danielle Doss. She's the executive director from Second Chance Society for our guest. But before I get to Danielle, we're going to talk about some of the things that are coming up for the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida. So July 30th in Tampa at the CDC of Tampa, we'll be hosting the Bankers Roundtable. Bankers will be coming in to discuss sponsorships, grants, investments they're doing in the community, as well as talk about the different services they provide as far as their banks are concerned. We'll have several banks, anywhere from 4 to 6, who will come in and talk about the different interests in, especially the Tampa Bay area. So we'll also be announcing at that time nonprofit capacity building grants for organizations that are with budgets of $100K or less. These are the financial stewardship and compliance grants. These grants will be open to organizations in the 4 counties serving the Tampa Bay area: Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Hernando counties. We'll be opening it up to them. We'll fund approximately 9 organizations to get their financial house in order, get their audit, their 990, get their financial status as far as entering in QuickBooks and QuickBooks monitoring for a year. We'll also help them get a bank account if they don't. I know it's kind of strange that I say that, but our last round for that particular project for capacity building grants, of the 9 awardees that we awarded grants to, 8 of them did not have a bank account. 8 of those organizations had their Florida SunBiz Corporation was intact, as well as their IRS status was intact, but they did not have a bank account. And that's definitely a no-no as far as organizations are concerned, especially those trying to get funding, be it sponsorships or grants, either with government or with the financial institutions that's needed. So I was really glad we were able to help those organizations. I was surprised by that number, but I was really glad we were able to help those organizations, and that's one of the things that this particular grant will do. So it'll open up July 30th. It'll run for approximately 2 weeks. We'll review and score, and then we'll start awarding the organizations and get them on the road to financial stewardship. So we also have several trainings that are going to come in the month of September and October. We're going to continue with social impact investing. We're going to talk about the stress of being an ED/CEO, and other meetings that we're going to put together and trainings that we're going to put together that we're going to offer not only live but also via Zoom, so everybody can participate. And the whole object of the game is to get us, as organizations, get us stronger within our communities. So today we're joined by Danielle Doss. She's the executive director of the Second Chance Society. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, Cornell, for having me.
We look forward to having this conversation. Danielle runs a great organization. She's going to tell you a lot about it. But before we get to that, Danielle, one thing I love to do is learn people's histories. So I'm very interested. How did you get here?
So I was definitely one always curious about how people and communities thrive as a young child, and so from a young age, I was raised to believe that we all have a responsibility to give back to our community, help our neighbors, leave this earth better than we found it, and so belief, those values, kind of drove my professional career and my path in life. And it really is something that I live by every day. So that's kind of what drove me to pursue nonprofit management, nonprofit leadership, to study social work. And then ultimately to pursue a doctorate, because what I realized is that people, even in their worst states, they have great talent, they have great determination, but are often lacking the opportunities and access to systems to help them thrive. And so today, as CEO of Second Chance Society, I get to lead that work every day by helping to remove barriers to people who are looking for opportunity to have a second chance at life.
So wait a minute, Danielle. Have I been disrespecting your name and not calling you Dr. Doss?
No disrespect.
I have not been calling you Dr. Doss.
You have
Okay,
not.
all right, okay. I apologize. I apologize for not recognizing. So, Dr. Doss, I will change that from this point forward. I definitely apologize. So, Dr. Doss, what is it? I noticed you talked about you want to give back to the community, right? But were you always in that mode, or did something drive you in order to this avenue that we're on right now?
I've always been in this mode. So I was born and raised in the great city of Chicago, and my grandmother had a heavy influence on my life. So my very first job at the age of 15 years old was working for a city alderman, which is kind of like working in between the position of a mayor and a commissioner,
Gotcha.
right? And I was doing customer service and responding to calls of constituents who said, hey, there's a rat in my alley, or my trash hasn't been picked up in a week, or hey, it's back to school time and we need resources in our community. And so I think my grandmother having me involved in the community that way, and that being my first introduction to work, kind of just set me on a path to always wanting to be sure I was tapped into what's going on in my community and what the needs were.
Well, we're grateful. Thank you for being in this space and wanting to give back to the community. We're definitely grateful, Dr. Doss. I greatly appreciate it. So let's talk about Second Chance Society. What is the mission for Second Chance?
So, Second Chance Society's mission is simple. It's to assist homeless and other struggling individuals by providing encouragement and removing material barriers to self-sufficiency. When I first read that mission, I said, what does other struggling mean? And what that really translates into for our organization is that people are in transition. They're transitioning out of sober homes, out of homeless shelters, post-incarceration. And when they're getting out of these facilities, they're needing an opportunity to stabilize themselves so that they can stand up on their own 2 feet. And so what we often see is that these individuals are trained, right? They've already done the hard work. They've completed the treatment. They've served their time. They may even have trainings and certifications under their belt, but they're looking for an opportunity to earn income. And so that's where Second Chance Society steps in to provide them with those resources that they need to say yes to opportunity.
So, Dr. Doss, it sounds like you covered the gambit, right? You don't just deal with folks who are formerly incarcerated, but you deal with folks who are homeless, coming out of treatment, providing services and training. Are you doing training as well?
Yeah, so we generally are partnered with other vocational institutions to provide the training because
Love the word partner.
we partner. Absolutely. Collaboration is the key. And so the industries that individuals come to us seeking or are already kind of certified in and need to be recertified vary. And so us being able to partner with organization like the academic institutions vocational training institutions, or even Career Source or OIC or Urban League of Broward County, who are also offering trainings at their locations, is key for us to, again, expanding that opportunity so they can tap into wherever the resource is.
So, what what are some of the challenges from your side of the equation? And I'm going to ask about the challenges from the people you serve next. But what are the challenges you see from your side of the equation?
From a leadership perspective of leading a nonprofit, or from
Let's
like
start
the
there. Let's start there. Let's start there.
did I just get myself in trouble?
Yes, you did.
Oh my
but
goodness.
let's start there. Let's start there. Let's start from the leadership perspective of a nonprofit, especially one of your where you're providing services and bringing up people who have been suffering. What are your challenges as far as that is concerned?
Yeah. So, what I love about Second Chance Society is that when it was founded back in 2001 by our founder, Pat Owen, she really wanted to fill a gap in the community. And so, we have, plenty of studies that indicate there's thousands of nonprofits that exist across the state, across hundreds of
24,000
thousands
in Florida.
across the nation. And so when people decide that they want to do good, sometimes that translates into I want to start my own nonprofit organization, which may not always be a need. And so when I came to Second Chance Society and noticed that this organization was principally built to be a gap filler in the community, and that we partner with over 90 other social service organizations, from hospitals and Broward Sheriff's Office to other nonprofit organizations, that made me smile. Very much heartened that we get to be an organization that, they're working with a case manager or a therapist or a counselor, and they have developed these plans of how do I get my life back on track. But at the point that they need income and they need to just remove a barrier to employment, whether that be accessing training to be marketable for employment, or it's, hey, I was offered a job, I did the legwork to find my own job, and I got an offer letter, but I don't have the funds because I'm in transition to have steel-toed work boots to work on a construction site, or to have a state ID that I'm going to need to give to HR for onboarding. That's where we exist. So I think because we've operated like that, that's allowed us to really see great outcomes very quickly for the people that we serve. But being a smaller organization that does that type of gap filling work, when we identify new needs that are also missing from the community or not, abundant in the community of nonprofits, then it's been an upsell, I think, to funders to say, hey, we would like to expand our services to see, meet this other gap that we're seeing. And it's very challenging, I think, sometimes to change the mindset of when you've been doing a certain one thing for 25 years to expand your work, right? So
change is always hard.
it's hard, but it's a conversation, right? And so I know that we have a lot of conversations about the importance of relationship building in this nonprofit space. Not only service, social service organization, but leaders to funders, whether that be in the corporate or the foundation space. And I think that these entities are willing to have the conversation, and I think that's the beauty of the ecosystem that exists for nonprofits, is that the conversation is always willing to be had. The resources don't always come as quickly, but the conversation is there.
So, Dr. Doss, you talked about the gaps that you feel. Are those constantly changing? And if so, and if they are, is it because the landscape may be changing, especially as far as employment is concerned?
I find that the gaps, maybe they don't change. Maybe they become more pressing. Maybe there's a greater need. And I feel as though in the nonprofit space, there's always this greater need for something once you see administrative changes on the federal level, state level, local level. But what I find in terms of the gaps is that they're more nuanced, in that generally as nonprofit organizations, and we all have a variety of services. A lot of them exist to be responsive to needs, to address crises, but maybe on the front end of that, on the preventative side, that there's not always a great deal of service and resource and work that exists to help us to get at the root cause of some of the issues that we see when we're addressing the crises.
Like everything in life, we have a tendency to be reactive rather than proactive. And it sounds like you're trying to fill that gap proactively because you're seeing stuff before it happens, right?
Absolutely.
Have you made that a part of your mission to be more proactive so you can see things into the future? I mean, none of us can tell everything into the future, but sounds like you're trying to see things into the future so you can fill gaps before the gaps appear.
Right, yeah. And what we're doing is listening, right? Because before you begin to shift a service or alter anything that you're doing, you need to listen to the community that you're saying that will be the recipient of these services. And so in our listening, we realize that a lot of the individuals are coming to us not only because they need a second chance and I need a job, it's because they're dealing with trauma, right, on a variety of levels. And so what we've done at Second Chance is to instill trauma-informed care into our workforce services. I call it trauma-informed workforce development because generally when someone's coming to us from a homeless shelter or even post-incarceration, when they get out, they are handed a list of resources and they're saying, go here, go there. But we know that the system of care is not necessarily as whole as we would hope it would be. And so what that translates into for the person needing help is that they're bouncing from one place to another, retelling their story and all
getting
their
frustrated.
And getting frustrated. And so when they land at the fifth organization, maybe they have showed up with an attitude or said words that would make the entity believe that they're not really there to change their lives, which is, different from what we
I understand it because I know if you bounce me, if I'm doing customer service, I need something done and you're bouncing me from person to person, I'm irritated by the time I get to the third person.
I'm upset. Absolutely. Right. But your ability to emotionally regulate in the moment may be a little better than the person who is on the street and trying to figure out where's my housing and where's my next meal coming from and how can I get some income to support myself.
And not do something that makes me go back to where I was before.
Absolutely.
I would think, right?
Absolutely.
So you said that they're inundated with resources, and it they get frustrated from having to go place to place to place because we're not the ones to help you. You need to go to this organization. And then we say, no, we're not. You're not quite in our mission. We need to send you to this organization. So how do you fill that gap? Before I get to that, another question: how do you fight that frustration with your clients?
It honestly goes back to listening, right? Because if you only listen to respond, you're not actually listening to the client when they're speaking. And yes, when they're speaking, there may be not so pleasant words that they throw across. And you, as service providers, we have to understand that is not personal. But we also have to teach in the moment as well. So we will listen to you, but at the moment that we are open to speak, we actually say, hey, we hear you, absolutely. Understand what you're going through, or maybe don't completely understand what you're going through, but we're here to help in any way we can. But in order to help you, there needs to be a level of respect and understanding if we're going to move forward together. And we find that generally works. What I often hear, even when someone says, hey, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I want to talk to your manager. I want to talk to your supervisor, right? Is that, again, it really is just listening. And then once they're done, they realize that, oh, wait, they didn't hang up on me. They didn't meet me on my level and get frustrated after all of that venom that was spewed at them. And 100% of the times, there's an apology before I even open my mouth to speak or my team opens their mouth, because they're like, wait, there was complete silence in this moment where I was just doing all of this. And now that I have their ear because I realized they were listening, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. Not saying that that's pie in the sky, that's how it's going to work all the time. But calm and trauma-informed care has been a great approach to to
So
the
it sounds like
tracking
you have a
client
very
needs.
special team that because
Amazing team.
I would when people throw a reaction at you, their first instinct is to react as well. If they get loud, you get loud. If they
Hmm.
get angry, you get angry. And it takes a very special person in order to listen and without reacting and be able to say, okay, here's how we can help. Are you done? Are you done with yelling and screaming? And so now let's get down to finding your issue and fixing your issue.
Hmm.
So are your how are the folks who work for you who have to endure, because that's what it is,
Hmm.
that are enduring all of this, how are they specially trained or?
They are, and I don't want to make it seem as though this is like the general like occurrence, but
Sure, it's got to
certain,
happen from time
but
to time.
it absolutely happens from
Hmm.
time to time, and so yes, all of our staff who are in the program side of the house are trained, certified in mental health or behavioral health. They have certifications in trauma resilience, and then there's just internal training that happens about like how to interact, and so if there is a difficult client that they're interfacing with, when they get off that call, they'll say, hey, do you have a moment? Can we talk about, someone that I just spoke to, and, maybe what can we, and the question is always, what can we do to help them? Not, I'm so upset. But then as a leader, we have to be mindful that there is a level of secondary trauma that just happened there as well for
Sure.
our team, right? And so being able to meet them at that space of whether it's in one-on-one supervision or in talking to them in that moment of, hey, you know, I'm grateful that you're trained in this area. I'm grateful that you are actually implementing the training that you have. But at the same time, I know that that couldn't have been easy. I know that that was difficult for you. How are you feeling in this moment, right? So there's a level of care that's being provided to them as staff.
That's so important, and that's probably why you have such a great staff, because they feel the support when something like that happens. They deal with what they need to deal with, but they also need support as well. I think that's key for all of us as social impact organizations. All of you are providing so many services and under so much stress. Is that your team has to know that they have support as well, because they need it.
Absolutely.
I mean, the last thing we want them to do is take that home with them as well, right? I
Right.
always admire people who deal with services and dealing with services with other people, because it's always amazing me how those folks have been able to separate that and not take it home with them.
Right.
You know, it's always amazed me how they do it. I got a great friend of mine, and she's a social worker, and I ask her, how do you not, after you've gone through that, you've gone through a session for an hour with a person, how do you not feel that later? You know what I mean? But
Right.
it's being able to compartmentalize, I think, right?
Absolutely. And compartmentalize. And one of the organizations when I started in this work of nonprofit and economic development, I worked for an organization in Atlanta, and it was actually a part of our employment assistance plan for those on the program side of the house to have access to therapeutic resources. Of course, depending on the community, your
Sure.
background, your ethnicity, and what you guys, what you were raised to believe about accessing therapeutic
culture is
supports. They may or may not have taken advantage of that opportunity that the organization provided, but I think that it was imperative that the leadership of that organization put those resources in place for staff should they need to access those.
I
So
totally agree.
that's something that we can do as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Definitely, thank you for that. So as you deal with those folks who are coming from these extreme circumstances, how do they find out about your particular organization?
So what's interesting is over the past 2 years, we've been working to increase the visibility of Second Chance,
Okay.
through, updating our website, doing e-newsletters, doing social media, etc. But historically, and what continues to work well for all organizations is word of mouth, right? And so I mentioned a little bit earlier that we partner with over 90 plus organizations across the social
Wow.
service sector. So there's a history of them knowing kind of where we stand in the gap in services, and they automatically kind of reply to us or refer to us through our website, and we respond to
You
those requests.
you mentioned earlier that there was another part of the mission that you guys were doing earlier up until perhaps after you took over. So what is the difference between what was when it was founded
Mhm.
as to now?
So when we were founded, our principal program, core program, is called the Hand Up program, which is dedicated to helping remove those barriers to workforce, whether it is the tools, the boots, the clothing, the uniforms that are being requested by employers, or the vocational training if you need to be upskilled. Maybe 10 years after the organization was started, the founder started a birth certificate and ID program because that was another realized gap, not only for employment and education purposes, but for even the fact that we deal with a lot of unhoused individuals that they needed birth certificates in order to go
Did
along
not
with
have
their
their
packages,
documents and
right?
didn't know how to get them. I
And
would
didn't
take
know
it.
how to get them. So vital documentation for sure, the cost of it, the process of it. And so we launched that program and have been running that ever since. And so since I've come on board, maintained and grown those programs. And then since then have piloted initiatives to again bring in that trauma informed care with workforce to make sure we're not just helping someone get a job or helping them get a birth certificate, but in that initial interaction with the client, when we realize that they're dealing with some level of trauma, kind of walking through that with them and helping them to access resources in order to deal with it, so that they don't take that on the job or to their next opportunity. And to also just inform us as we're placing individuals in employment that we're not placing them in environments that are actually going to be triggers for them. And then we think, oh, we placed you and you're still there. And then 3 months later, they quit their job because there was something that we weren't aware of when
So
we
wait a
first
minute,
placed
you
them.
get that deep to you try to get you don't want to put them in the position where they have to quit because they've gone through something, they've been traumatized from before. So you get that deep into it. You're not just saying, okay, there's a construction job open, go fill it.
Right.
You guys are actually studying. You're actually getting into their mindset and what they possible triggers they may have, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so what's interesting, I mean, we've had success as quick as someone came to us referred from a case manager and needed a job. We applied for a job that day. They got placed at Coca-Cola. They had a job starting that very next week. But we have also individuals who will see that success and say, well, Second Chance can, remove the barrier quick and help me get placed and get me a job because that's all I need, which is understandable because when you need income, you need income. But some we meet and we're just like, it's not going to be that quick for you, right? Because in interacting with you, we realize that you are actually not dealing with whatever it is that's going on in this moment. And so if we place you, it's not a benefit to you because you're maybe going to snap on the job and who knows what that's going to
Sure.
cause later. And it also impacts the next person that we try to place, right? Because we want employers to work with us to place individuals, but the more we place people that are constantly quitting or causing issues on the job, then that's going to create a problem, right? So we try to be very targeted in how we move someone towards employment. So maybe they need to still work on their recovery. Maybe they need to go address whatever childhood trauma that they had that is maybe going to impact their ability to stay on a job and earn income.
That also has to affect the employer as well. So the employer got to respect what you're doing because the employer knows that Second Chance Society is not just sending me anyone that could possibly quit because something has triggered them 2 months from now. Then I have to start all over again, training, bringing someone into the organization, building the culture, have to start all over again, right? So I can depend on Second Chance Society to help not totally eliminate that process, but to help me as an employer actually get that process down where I'm not doing that again, right?
Right. I mean, we as leaders know that like the greatest thing that we deal with the greatest resource that we have are our people, right? And what people are being trained, it's easy to train someone on a skill that they're going to need. That's why you have on the job training in most places. We can teach you how to do the job, but you can't teach someone how to emotionally regulate, right? So if we're doing that front end work to just make sure that a person who is whole and hopefully healed can show up to your workplace, and I think it's going to help with your onboarding process, right?
I love that about you guys. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you were that deep into the process. That's simply amazing. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Danielle Doss of Second Chance Society.